All right. Good morning, everybody. Dr. Gunyon here. We're going to be going over um, complete hormone testing today, right? So I take care of a lot of ladies and guys, and what happens is that they get their hormones tested, and their labs come back normal. They come back normal a lot of times, and they're like, "Well, how the heck can my labs be normal and I still have all of these symptoms?" I have people that come back and they get their labs tested, and then they get put on some hormone replacement therapy, and they still feel terrible. Lots of different symptoms. I mean, there's always these common symptoms around hormones of fatigue and weight gain and sleep issues and irritability and brain fog, poor libido, right? There are symptoms that are definitely disrupting in life, and you don't want to have them, and it just gets really confusing. And so I just want to make sure that we're getting clarity on the confusion, because if we're missing something, if you have blind spots, you got to know about it, right? And you got to create awareness around it. Because if you don't know there's a problem, then you just don't know there's a problem. You just figure like, hey, I think I'm doing everything I'm supposed to. But unfortunately, again, our systems are in a way broken, and we got to understand the differences between crisis care and healthcare. And so I'm going to talk about some of these different factors around hormones. We're going to be talking about three big questions here today. Is that why is standard medical testing often incomplete? We'll talk about how to test hormones completely, and then we'll talk about some lifestyle changes that you can make right now that will help to support your hormones, right? Like stop making mistakes and damaging your hormones right now. And I want to give you some good action steps to go out of or leave here with today around that. So let's dive in here. Let's get rocking and rolling. This is a huge topic. Okay, this is a huge topic. I always want to serve and get a ton of information out there, but then I start, getting things organized for these, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much information, and so I'm never trying to speak over anybody's head or anything like that. Just know that, right? I want to keep it as simple as possible. But let's really just dive into this first question of like, why is standard medical hormone testing often incomplete? Now here's a very important point: is that this always remember this is that hormone imbalances are often an appropriate response. Okay, they're often an appropriate response to imbalances elsewhere in your body. This is why when you basically, take care of those other imbalances, it often addresses the hormonal issues. Like it brings you back to your set point. Okay, we'll talk about this in more depth, but just remember that hormone imbalances are often a appropriate response. It's your body doing the right thing. Okay. Now, another thing about this incomplete or incomplete hormone testing in the standard medical system is that most of the time the treatment is focused on hormones and not what's causing the hormones to change, based off of that statement, that hormone imbalances are often appropriate and effects to other systems being disrupted. Now what we got to start to understand is that the purpose of medical care and really understand there's a big difference between treatment and health restoration. Okay, and in the medical model, it's about treatment, that there's a symptom, and a lot of times, you got to get things that somebody can become more stable and safe. That's a primary concern in medicine, that we need to treat these symptoms because it can be an emergency situation. Like I think I always remember, like a heart attack. Like if you had a heart attack, man, you better take some drugs, right? You better take some things that'll stop that heart attack from progressing, right? And that's definitely a great time to take medicine. And then if you have to have surgery, open heart surgery can save your life again in that scenario. But see, that type of mindset is also applied to other, healthcare or medical systems, and hormones are definitely that same way. Is it's kind of like that same philosophy of crisis care. You're going to die, do this so you don't die, but it really doesn't have anything to do with health and asking why it happened. Okay, so that's the thing, is like treatment, because treatment is just trying to basically manipulate the body to reduce symptoms. And the symptoms aren't the cause of the problem again. And that's kind of what I'm trying to get to, is with the point here is that the hormones aren't the cause of the problem. They're an effect of the cause of the problem. So you shouldn't just be treating hormones. We should be looking for the reasons why the hormones are changing, right? So this even happens in the natural world. And I don't like, I mean, I I do help people in early stages to try to help reduce and minimize and manage symptoms, but at the same time of addressing the root causes, right? So we don't want to be just treating the hormones in a natural approach or a medical approach and not and just saying, hey, the symptoms are better, but we never really address the root causes, right? We don't want to leave that the root causes neglected, because if you neglect the root causes, it's going to get worse. Okay, so think of that like a fire in a house where you have alarms going off in the house because there's a fire. The problem is not the alarms. The alarms, the symptom is telling you that there's a problem. And if you just take the batteries out of the fire alarm, it doesn't put out the fire, right? So the fire just keeps consuming the building. So there's a progression that continues to happen if you don't put out the fire. That's the point, right? That's the point, that you don't want to just trade symptom relief for your body to continue down a negative progression and cause more damage over time, right? So hopefully that kind of makes sense. And again, I'm trying to give you lots of information, right? So we got to get out of this treatment mindset. We got to understand more health restoration. We got to understand that the medical systems function. Also, what they do is they compartmentalize into specialties that are focusing on one system and not how each system is interacting with one another. I mean, let me say that again. So medical systems function in compartmentalized specialties, focusing on how, on one system, not how each system is interacting with one another. Now, this makes sense in a more of a crisis care treatment model. Like, think about it, like if you have a heart problem, you don't want to go to a podiatrist, a foot doctor who specialize in feet for your heart, right? Like that makes total sense. But the problem is that it's still more of a treatment that we're going to treat the heart, we're going to treat the feet. We're not talking about how it's all working together, but that's not what medicine is for. Okay, we've got to remove that expectation. Like, and it's okay. That's why I was telling everybody we got to become our own doctors, because we got to understand that it's okay. It's not the doctor's fault, so to speak. It's that's their scope of practice, and we've been taught to believe that their scope of practice is more about restoration of health, but it's not. And I know it can be confusing, but when we understand that there's a compartmentalization that must take place in medicine when you're doing treatments and using, different therapies, it's okay. But we've got to understand that they're not looking at how everything's working together. All right. So this is a big part of the problem of why the hormones are testing is often incomplete, is that we're not looking again for things that are causing the hormones to change, that the docs, the endocrinologists, the hormone doctors are just specializing in the hormones and managing hormones, not what's affecting the hormones and causing them to change. Let's go to the next point here, is that medical testing is primarily designed or was created again for emergency care, which requires a faster turnaround time on labs and implementation to save and stabilize someone's life in an emergency. So let me say that again. Medical testing is primarily designed or was created for emergency care, which requires a faster turnaround time on the labs so they can implement the treatments quicker to save and stabilize someone's life in an emergency, right? And so this is why the primary mechanism, I would say, or the primary way that people get their hormones tested is through the blood. Blood samples are very quick. You go to a hospital, you go to these clinics, they have their own labs that they can get the results within a day and within hours. And in emergency situations, that's extremely important, right? Again, like think of a heart attack. Like, let's get this information back. Let's get the most targeted treatment in these moments. But when it comes to hormones, it's not the same. It's not an emergency situation that you're going to die in the next moment, but they still use the same type of a standard, right? So that's what I said here next, is that the same standard or technique of testing gets applied to other evaluations and treatments like hormones that aren't an immediate life or death emergency. Okay, so it's like the standardized care that, this is how we do things, and this is how we do things. And so we use the blood samples as the primary way to analyze it. And can we get information from the blood for the hormones? Absolutely. But it's more about the standardized care. It's not, and the treatments that they can do. It's not about health. It's not about health restoration. It's about gaining quick information that we can apply therapies to, and there's a value to that. Like it's a very convenient and logical thing that needs to take place, especially again like in emergency situations. But the hormones don't line up the same as like if you had a heart attack, right? Hopefully you can get to understand the difference of that. So the same standard technique of testing gets applied to the other evaluations and treatments like hormones that aren't immediate life or death emergency. Therefore, the hormones are tested through the blood. Okay. Now, so again, here's the benefits of that: is it is faster. It is accurate. Okay. It's easy and it's good for treatment implementation quickly, right? So it's good for the treatment implementation, but it's not complete. Okay. Now, see, that's the problems with it. The problems is that it's incomplete. It's just a snapshot, okay, of time, and not good for health restoration, right? So that's a very important thing. Like there's a benefit, but the difference again is that it's a treatment model versus what we're talking about is health restoration, and that requires a different thought process. That requires different testing to do that. Here's another really good point about why, again, medical hormone testing is often incomplete, is that standard medical testing is usually only tests the markers that are covered by insurance. The markers that are covered by insurance are typically only the markers that can be treated with a medical therapy or medication. So let me say that again. So standard medical testing usually only tests the markers that are covered by insurance. The markers that are covered by insurance are typically only markers that can be treated with a medical therapy or medication. Therefore, if a marker doesn't have a therapy medication, solution, it's not tested or covered by insurance. Okay. So this goes back again, treatment model, saving somebody's life, but it's applied to something that's not as much of an emergency like hormones when you compare it to like a heart attack. All right. So again, we're dealing with system problems, but it's a part of like, we got to remove the expectation that the medical system should be doing health restoration, where it's more about emergency care. Okay. There is a compartmentalization there that needs to take place. So again, standard medical testing usually only tests the markers that are covered by insurance. The markers that are covered by insurance are typically only markers that can be treated with medical therapy or medication. Therefore, if a marker does not have a medical therapy medication solution, it doesn't get tested or covered by insurance. Okay, so what that happens is it leaves markers that should be tested for health reasons. They're not going to test it. Okay, it's a different mindset. It's a different purpose. It's a different reason. So trying to help you to gain some clarity there. So these are some of the reasons. These are some of the fundamental reasons why the medical hormone testing is often incomplete, right? And I'd say coming back to a big one again is that, like I said at the very beginning, is that hormone imbalances are often an appropriate response to other imbalances happening elsewhere in your body. So if you just look at the hormones, you have incomplete testing. All right. So let's move into the second question, which is, how to test hormones completely. Well, what we got to understand from here is understanding the life cycle of hormones. Now, what I mean by that is that there's this whole sequence of events that must take place to make hormones. And so what that means is that, number one, you have to have production of hormones. And so you have cells in your body that produce hormones. So the synthesis and secretion of hormones. The second part of this life cycle, if you will, is transport. So once you make the hormones, they have to be transported throughout your body and then be distributed and also interact with other hormones. Once those hormones are transported and getting to their destinations, the sensitivity of the cells at those destinations has to be there. So those cells have to be ready and able to accept the hormones that those cells target. Okay. I know it's a little bit tough, right? So again, production. So you're producing hormones, you're transporting them throughout your body, and then it ends up where it needs. The hormones end up where they need to be, and the cells that those hormones need to go to need to be ready for them. And then the last step is detoxification. Okay. And so I hate the word detoxification, by the way, but you do have to basically excrete hormones back out of your body. And where do you do that? Is through your sweat, through your stool and your urine. Okay. Those are the ways that your body gets stuff out, right? So this is the life cycle again: production, transport, sensitivity of the cells that the hormones are supposed to go to, and then detoxification of the hormones once they're used. All right. Now, so you have to understand if you want complete hormone testing, you have to look at all of that, not just are you producing it, are you transporting it, right? You have to look at the whole picture. The second big thing about complete hormone testing is that you have to understand that there's hierarchies. Okay, what does a hierarchy mean? Is that there's an order of importance, right? And when you look at the order of importance and you look at how hormones are made, you often hear things about the body called axes. Okay, so that this what this means is that how these systems and hormones are connected. And a big axis that helps you to understand order of importance is called the HPATG axis. Now, what does that stand for? So H stands for hypothalamus, which is part of your brain. The P stands for pituitary, which is a gland up in your brain. Okay, so this is all about brain stuff. Okay, so you could think of like this is about your body recognizing its environment and saying, listen, we need to produce hormones. Okay, so the hypothalamus, pituitary. The A stands for adrenals. The T stands for thyroid. And then the G stands for gonadal. Okay, so adrenals, if you're not familiar, they sit on top of your kidneys. They produce your stress hormones like cortisol, adrenaline, DHEA is another one. Okay, and so those are glands on top of your kidneys who produce those hormones. The thyroid, sits right here. We hear about the thyroid, I'd say, a lot. And then the gonadal is the sex hormones. Okay, so a lot of people would say estrogen or testosterone, right? So, but you don't think ovaries, think testes, okay? And but it works in that order. There's a sequence there. And so, oftentimes again in incomplete testing, we got docs who are just testing the gonadal part, but not the thyroid and adrenal. Okay. You got doctors who are testing the adrenal, but not the thyroid and the gonadal, right? So if you don't have that complete picture, then you have incomplete testing. And then it also works in that order, okay? That, a big part of that is adrenal to thyroid to gonadal, okay? But there's so much emphasis placed on the gonadal part, the sex hormones, for a lot of good reasons. But I'm just trying to help you to understand and prove the point that it's incomplete testing, okay? But again, I talked about the reasons why it's incomplete on that first question, right? I can't keep reiterating those things, or these Q&As last too long, right? So anyways, what did I just say here? And how do we test hormones completely? That we have to understand their life cycle, meaning production, transport, sensitivity, and detoxification. We have to understand that there's a hierarchy: hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal, thyroid, gonadal. Okay, that's how we start to get a whole complete picture. Also remember that these hormones are often changing because of other factors happening in your body. So you got to address those other factors in your body. And I'll just say a big part of that is your gut, and because your gut is a huge part of your immune system and stress response. Okay, because we got to talk about stress response all the time. Okay, because that's what your body adapts to on a daily basis: is physical, chemical, and emotional stressors. And it adapts to those stressors appropriately. But if you keep doing those stressors over and over again, the ones that you know about, the ones you don't know about, which is usually what's happening on the inside, then you keep perpetuating the problem, and your body can only take that for so long. Okay, think of it like being stuck on an iceberg, that if it's super cold, your body starts to adapt by shivering. But if you don't get out of the cold, you don't have the right equipment on, your body's going to basically continue to freeze, right? In that mechanism, in that adaptation, your body will start to make things priority. Okay, what I mean by that is it's going to take blood and nutrients to your vital organs. And why does it do that? Is to keep you alive and protect you. But in that mechanism, it allows things like fingers and toes to be exposed, or they're not as important, right? They're not as important as your brain. They're not as important as your heart or your lungs, your liver, you know. So that your body prioritizes and say, listen, you can live without these, but you can't live without these. So what happens, or what can happen, is that your fingers could literally freeze and die. And that's not your body doing the wrong thing. It's just adapting to its environment. Okay. And this is a once you understand that, you just really become your own doctor, because now you start to recognize that the body's adapting how it's supposed to. It's not damaging you on purpose. It's just trying to adapt to the stressors that you keep placing on it. And then you need to be aware of the stressors so you can stop doing it. And that's part of the reason of doing these lives, right? And connecting with you. So understand the body's mechanisms of protection, and then the stress response from physical, chemical, emotional stressors, it's going to do that. All right. So coming around to testing hormones completely, let's talk about an example here. Now, there's something called the steroid hormone pathway. So this is those gonadal hormones. So what you're gonna be looking at here is there's a hormone called progesterone, which is the first hormone synthesized, basically. Okay, there's a group that it belongs to, but progesterone hormones. The second, what those progesterones should be converting over to is the androgens, which is what testosterone's part of. Okay, and then from there, the testosterones convert into estrogens. Okay, and so there's the sequence of events that just take place even within the sex hormones. And so when you're evaluating those, not only do you want to know what progesterone's doing or testosterone's doing or what androgens or what estrogen is doing, you have to understand what all of those things are doing. And it's a really good point that there's not just one estrogen. Estrogen is not a singular hormone. It's actually a combination of nine that has nine parts to it. Okay. And so again, that's another really easy, I think, point of understanding that we have incomplete hormone testing, because standardized blood testing is not going to evaluate all nine components of that. Okay. And that's not what's best of it for us on a health level. When you need to know quickly, testing through the blood again can be beneficial. So I'm not trying to knock it. I'm just trying to help you to compartmentalize it, right? All right, so here we go. So when we're looking at the steroid hormone pathway, what we got to think about again is how do we go? Let's talk about the production side. Okay, so number one, we have to have clear feedback from our body to our brain. Thinking about like, hey, I'm stuck on an iceberg, right? So your body's starting to freeze. It tells your brain, hey, do certain things. And so we have to have a good, clear feedback system, brain axis, the HPA-TG axis, and that axis and that response is really affected by the stress response. Okay, so when we're talking about hormones and producing hormones, the stress response is huge. And what I try to keep simple around there is that think of the stress response around like you're getting chased by a bear. Okay, so if you're getting chased by a bear, do your hormones change? Yeah, of course, right? Like your body's going to make a priority for you to run away, and in order for you to run away and have energy for those systems that help you to escape, that your body's gonna make priorities towards what? Your muscles, your oxygen, like so your lungs, your heart. So it's gonna increase your respiration. It's gonna increase your heartbeat, your blood flow, and so you can run away from the bear. But in that mechanism, in this natural form of mechanism, what it does is it actually shuts down hormones. Because, like especially sex hormones, you don't need to have a baby basically or reproduce if you're getting chased by a bear. It's not the right time, right? And so like think about like that's just logical. That's like, oh yeah, that makes sense, right? Where like if your body's stressed out, it's not a good time for you to reproduce. And that's the primary reason why we have sex hormones. Okay, right? The progesterones, the testosterone, the estrogen is to reproduce. And so if your body's stressed out, getting chased by a bear, it's not the right time to reproduce. Another quick example about that you can see to relate to is that, there's these Olympic level athlete ladies that they lose their cycle, or I mean, there's a lot that are an Olympic level, right? But they exercise a lot, they stress their body a lot, and they actually disrupt their cycle. And what that actually means is that their body's so stressed out that your body's just saying like, listen, you're not healthy enough to reproduce, right? And see how that perception changes there, that like you're like, man, this is Olympic level athlete lady, she looks great, man, she's very athletic, she's very capable physically, but actually her body's so weak and sick that she can't even reproduce because they can lose their cycle. You see, like, so just some, I guess you'd call those clinical pearls, right? But like, but just make some understanding around it. So in this stress response, getting chased by a bear, it shuts down the hormones, and because it's about reproduction. And so if you don't address the stress response through physical, chemical, and emotional stressors, then you're going to have incomplete testing, right? And also a good point here too is in the steroid hormone pathway, making these sex hormones, you have to have cholesterol to make those hormones. If you don't have cholesterol, you can't make those hormones. The organ that produces cholesterol in your body is your liver. Okay. Where's your liver at? In your gut. Okay. So if you do things to damage your gut, or you don't take care, basically don't take care of your gut, can that affect your liver? Absolutely. So could that affect your cholesterol? Absolutely. Okay. So that's, again, do you have complete hormone testing if you don't test cholesterol? Nope. All right. There's other parts of your little, they're called organelles in your cells called mitochondria. I bring it up. I mean, many people have heard of mitochondria before. If not, they help you to produce energy in your body. They're the main energy producers in your body. So what happens is that you actually have to have cholesterol work with the mitochondria in order to produce hormone. Okay. So the point is that there's multiple systems that have to work together to produce the hormone. So if you're not looking at these other systems, you have incomplete testing. But then also go back to the beginning of this and understand why medical systems do what they do, and that's okay. But we have to become our own doctors and understand the difference between treatment and health restoration. We're talking about health restoration, okay? So coming back around, the first step was production. We're talking about the steroid hormone pathway. The second part is transport. The stress response, again, will affect the transport. And a big part of this also is that when you're getting chased by a bear, it changes your metabolism of sugar. Okay, so think about this very logically, that if you're getting chased by a bear, you don't really have time to break down fat for energy. Your body wants quick, immediate energy, which comes from sugar. Okay, it's easier to break down. Okay, but then this affects your metabolism, which then there affects even another hormone called insulin. Okay, and so when you start to disrupt that blood sugar and insulin, what happens is that it affects transport in the bloodstream. And there's something called there's a marker that even medical testing will test, which is called sex hormone binding globulin. Okay, I know that's technical, but you can see this on some of the medical testing, and it's called SHBG for short. So that's its acronym, sex hormone binding globulin. Okay, and so sometimes they will evaluate the globulin, but they won't look at why it's changing. Okay, but that's just part of the analysis that you can have or not have that helps you to see some of the transport. But then you also need to really be looking at what insulin, glucose, and so that way you're understanding, okay, if sex hormone binding globulin is disrupted, it's very sensitive to the blood sugar regulation. Okay, I know this is getting technical, guys, but I'm not trying not to. I'm just wanting to prove that, like, we really need to do better on the testing. But we shouldn't expect medicine to do this. We should expect functional medicine to do this. Okay, so standard medicine versus functional medicine, and functional medicine testing versus standard medical testing. All right, so that's a little bit about transport. Let's go to sensitivity. So these are the cells. These are even the organs and the cells that they have. Like, think of testes, think of ovaries, and so we need to understand if those cells are working well and they're sensitive. Now, what can disrupt the sensitivity of those cells? Inflammation. Okay, inflammation in general can affect those cells. Okay, and it disrupts. You basically kind of think of it like it can clog the cells, the parts of the cells that are called receptors that grab onto the hormones. Okay, we'll just keep it like that. Okay, just keep it simple. We have receptors that grab onto the hormones. The inflammation can disrupt those receptors. Another big one right there that I think of is hormone mimicking chemicals. Okay, we have hormone disrupting chemicals, a lot of them going on in our environments right now. BPA, the bisphenol A, which is in plastic, is a big one. There's a bunch of there's phthalates with starts with a pH. Phthalates that are in a lot of uh, beauty care products that can mimic hormones and then therefore affect the cells that are supposed to be grabbing onto these hormones. Even like receipt paper, at the store has BPA in it. So like, there's these different levels of toxicity that we're getting exposed to that are affecting the sensitivity of our cells, creating inflammation. There's a lot of inflammation that comes from your gut also. So just to look at that, so that would affect the sensitivity of the cells. And then the detoxification process, when we're looking at the steroid hormone pathway, trying to stay on point here, that estrogen is a big player here, okay? Because estrogen is the end stage hormone, meaning it's the last hormone. The estrogens are the last hormones to be produced in this process. And so what happens with these hormones, and part of the analysis that I do all the time, is that we have to understand how the estrogens are breaking down and metabolizing. Okay. Because if they're not breaking down and metabolizing, meaning getting excreted out of the body very well, then they will build up in your body. Okay. So think of it like a sink that they should be draining, but basically you're plugging it up. And so now the hormone is building. All right. Now, what's tricky about that is that you can do a blood work analysis on estrogen, and estrogen can be within normal limits. But because you haven't analyzed the metabolism of it, you don't see and understand that it's actually clogged up. And you got to compare it to the other hormones. I mean, there's all these factors. Again, I told you there's a ton of information here. But you got to understand that you could look normal on a blood work, but you look at how it's being metabolized, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is not detoxifying out of the body. Now, this is a really important point because estrogen is an anabolic hormone. Anabolic means that it builds tissue. So when estrogen goes up, this is where you can have growth on cells, right? So that's cysts, that's fibroids, that's tumors, right? And so that's why you hear a lot of information and emphasis placed on estrogen, but detoxification of estrogen is super important. And if you're not analyzing that, and you're not going to be able to analyze that in the blood, okay, that you're going to be missing and have an incomplete picture and put yourself at risk, right? So all right, I think I kind of went off a little bit on that one. But you have to understand that again, there's production, transport, sensitivity, and then detoxification, and that detoxification principle is very important. Where does detoxification take place? A big part of it's in the liver as well, so that has to do with your gut. So if you want complete testing on your hormones, you better be testing the gut as well, completely, or as well, when you're looking at the gut. So how do I test the hormones completely? Well, I'm looking at the production, the transport, the sensitivity, and the detoxification. I'm putting a priority in the hierarchy of brain, adrenals, thyroid, gonadal. This does require, or can require, the use of saliva and urine, or urine and blood. Okay, so there's a combination there, just depending on what we need to do in certain time frames, that needs to be tested. If we're looking at the steroid hormone pathway and really getting a more in-depth analysis, even just on the hormones, you're going to want to do this at least in the urine. So that the urine shows us the metabolites. Okay, it shows us how things are breaking down. It shows us the whole steroid hormone pathway when we're talking about the sex hormones. Okay, and so this is vitally important. Okay, it also, the test that I typically do too, we're also looking at the adrenals, because the adrenals play a big role on how your hormones are being made. Okay, because your adrenals also use the same building materials, think of it that way, as your sex hormones. So if your adrenals are tapped out and they're being stressed, then it will take some of the building materials away from your hormones and apply it to the adrenals, which can leave you with hormone imbalances. Okay. So in order to really look at that whole picture, testing through the urine is highly effective. Okay. And what's great about the urine testing as well is that it's done in a 24-hour sample. Now, what does that mean? Is that you're testing throughout the day. Okay. So you're mapping out throughout the day. And compared to a blood test, you're looking at a snapshot in time. All right. So that's another big component to that. That is so useful when we're trying to do health restoration and not as much treatment. Okay, because you can definitely do treatment off of a urine test as well. That's why, again, you need to have all the testing, not just hormone testing. You got to look at the gut. I've emphasized as well. All right. So yeah, that's my points around that. So how to test the hormones completely. You got to look at the metabolites. You got to look at the production, the transport, the sensitivity, and the detoxification of these hormones. You have to understand the HPA axis, okay, HPA TG axis. You have to understand what other parts of your body are also affecting the hormones through testing. Because remember, hormone imbalance is often an appropriate response to other imbalances elsewhere in your body. So that requires testing throughout, not just on the hormones. So hopefully I nailed that and hammered that down. Okay. All right, let's move on so we can finish up here today. Is that lifestyle changes that we can make right now to support your hormones? Number one, stop the standard American diet. Okay, it's the acronym for that is SAD, Standard American Diet. Okay, there's no such thing as moderation either. Everybody, food is emotional. It's one of the most abused drugs out there. We're escaping our things in our life, that the things that are bothering us in life, and we often do that with food. And so we got to be better about this. There's no such thing as moderation. Your body just knows inflammation. Moderation is all about your emotions. It's not about physiology and how your body adapts. Okay, so the big inflammatory foods that I would tell anybody to stop right now is dairy. That includes cheese. Okay, I would even take out the other animal products, especially here if you want to be conservative. Okay, so that means a lot of people go to goat cheese, sheep cheese, goat milk, or like these different animal type products around milk and cheese. That there's some things that you got to know about those different animals, and there are ones that are better than others. But I think that just kind of think of it this way: is that we're the only a mammal, that um, drinks milk or uses milk past infancy. And also, we're the only one who really drinks or eats another animal's milk. Okay, so there's some unnaturalness to it. So, anyways, take out those animal dairy milk products. Okay, number two, gluten. Okay, it's not a fad. It's a problem. There's some other, we got some hybridized wheat out there for sure, especially here in America, that is also part of the problem, that intensifies the concentration of gluten. So that's part of the problem too. But our bodies just don't do good with gluten proteins, whether you're sensitive to it or not. I'm trying to help you out. Big five: dairy or animal milk products. Two, gluten. Okay. Number three, corn. Okay, corn. Think about it. You eat corn on the cob, it comes out corn off the cob. Our bodies really don't digest it very well. It is a grain. It's highly genetically modified. There's a lot of different reasons, but I'm trying to give you some advice here after years and years of doing this stuff. Animal dairy products or animal milk products, gluten, corn, soy, take it out. Okay, there's a lot of soy lecithin in different products. And then number five is the processed sugars. Things that are in boxes and bags, and the artificial sweeteners. Because just something says sugar free doesn't mean that it's healthy for you. I mean, you got diet sodas out there that have all of the artificial sweeteners in them, and those are toxic. Okay, so you got to eliminate. I mean, that's a toxin. Don't drink soda. You keep going off alcohol, right? These will damage your body, affect your gut, affect your hormones easily. Okay, easily. Those are easy things to take out. Okay, so take out those, at least those big five, right? So animal milk products, gluten, corn, soy, processed sugars. All right. Next thing is be aware and remove environmental toxins. So I just talked about genetically modified. Soy and corn are very much genetically modified. You got to watch that. You got to watch the glyphosate, which is the herbicides like Roundup has glyphosate in it, and on the genetically modified crops, they're going to have glyphosate on there. Okay, and glyphosate will damage your gut. It degenerates the microbiome, the good bacterias, and then it'll affect your hormones. Okay, the other toxins in our environments like mold. Okay, watch my other videos around mold. That's how I got into functional medicine because my wife had mold toxicity. The beauty care products. Okay, they have a lot of hormone disrupting chemicals, estrogen mimickers, and so you want to be aware of those. And so think of BPA, phthalates. Those are a couple big ones. But really, if you can't eat it, you probably shouldn't be putting it on your skin. That's a good rule of thumb. Medications, okay? Like I would say right here is that if you've been prescribed a medication, you need to talk, don't just remove it, talk to your doctor about options, okay? Talk to doctor about options. But then also, you're going to really, really need, if you're already taking a medication, you already got problems, and you better immediately get tested through a functional medicine approach, okay? And so you got to get after it, and that's not what medical doctors do. Okay, so anyways, what I'm talking about as far as medications are the over the counters. A lot of what people use a lot for pain relief. You got the Tylenols, the Advils, the ibuprofens. These are not healthy on your gut. They're not healthy on your hormones. Other ones are also birth control stuff. Okay, now again, that's another one that you want to talk to the doc who put you on them. But you got to understand that birth control is going to manipulate your hormones, right? It's going to manipulate your hormones, and there's many different forms of birth control, whether the pill, all the way to IUDs, even getting all the way up to hormone replacement therapy. You've got to talk to the docs who put them on you, put those things into your life. You can't just take my advice for it on the internet, right? You're not a patient of mine, and so that's that's neglect on my end. Like if you want me to understand and see what you need to do, then you have to become a patient. But that's why I always put an asterisk next to there. Is you got to talk to those docs. Understand that there is you have to create an awareness. There's some changes that you can make around that probably, but then also we're talking about what I mean right there is I'm talking about like the birth control type stuff. But when you get back to the over counter things of the anti-inflammatories, those are things that you can take out. Okay, like you have complete control over those. You can buy them at the store, and you just got to realize that they're not building health for you. And people think that it's not that big a deal because they're over the counters and they use a lot of them. It's not good. Okay. So that's my recommendation for you of how can you help your hormones immediately is remove those over the counters. Okay. Don't be popping the ibuprofens for every pain that you have and all the inflammation that you have. Find out why you have the inflammation. All right. Next thing, foods to add in. Okay, so foods that really support hormones are good fats. So what are good fats? Olive oil, coconut oil, avocado oil. Those are wonderful. Flax seeds, chia seeds, hemp seeds. These are all really, really good fats. You want great proteins, okay? And that plants have tons of proteins in them. A lot of the green veggies, that's why there's plant-based protein powders out there. You can get a ton of protein from plants. Not that I recommend everybody go vegetarian. We have teeth in our mouth are designed to eat meat. Okay, so what does that tell me is that we need to eat some meat, but we need to have really high quality grass-fed, 100% grass-fed, no hormones, no antibiotic type meats. Look at some of my other videos for that, some more of those details on that. But those are good fats and good proteins to be adding in. Good sources of veggies are cruciferous veggies, which are like the broccolis, the Brussels sprouts, the cauliflower. Now, what you want to do with those is make sure you're cooking them. It is a little bit easier on your gut and your body when you cook them. And so they really help with your liver and detoxification of hormones. The cruciferous veggies do. The green leafy veggies have tons of different vitamins, minerals, fiber in them. I would stick to a lot of cruciferous, a lot of dark leafy greens, a lot of squashes. You can also do think about the colors of the rainbow when it comes to veggies, that you want a whole spectrum of colors. Eliminate as much white and brown as you can because everybody's eating white potatoes. They're very starchy, sugary, not much nutrients going on there. You want to be more colorful with your veggies. And so those would be some foods to add in. Really good fats, I mentioned, good proteins that are also plant-based sources, gets lots of different colors. When it comes to fruit, if you really want to help, just stick to the ones that have a lot of antioxidants, which are the berries. Make sure that they're 100% organic, 100% organic on those. Make sure you're getting exercise in, right? Exercise helps with your blood sugar regulation. Your muscles are one of the most, they're one of the biggest metabolic organs in your body that help with regulation of blood sugar. Um, you just have to watch the intensity of that, especially if you're women. Um, and again, that's a whole nother topic in itself. But also, what I like about the exercise is it helps with stress reduction and can support your adrenals when you're doing it at a more of a moderate intensity. Okay, so you don't want to be easy; you want to be a little bit higher than that, but not too crazy either. So make sure you're getting movement. All right, at least 30 minutes a day for sure. Right, you hear that. And then big stuff here is you better get, I mean, it's fundamental, guys, is that if you don't know what's going on the inside, you're leaving your health, your greatest asset, exposed. And a big point today is that the standard medical testing is not evaluating for health restoration. It's evaluating really for emergency care, even if it's not quite an emergency like hormones are. Okay. It's not the same scenario as a heart attack, but it's kind of approached the same way. All right. Because that's how the system works. And so that's why they test it a certain way and why they use insurance. And then if the insurance doesn't cover it, then they don't test it. And then if there's not a treatment for it, meaning like a medication or therapy, they're not going to test it. Okay. So you got to understand those differences. Go back to the beginning of the video. Complete functional medicine testing is not going to be just about your hormones. It's going to be looking at your stress response. It's going to be looking at your immune system, which is your gut. It's going to be looking at your detoxification centers, which has a lot to do with your gut again and your liver, your kidneys. It's going to be looking at your metabolic systems. And so you got to think of that like a complete picture. And an example that I like to use is that if you're taking care of plants, plants require certain elements, right? Sun, soil, water, making sure that I would say the cat's not peeing in the soil, so there's not added toxicities to it. And if the plant's wilting that has symptoms, like people do, has symptoms, and you've never taken care of the fundamental elements or tested the fundamental elements of that, then you're going to be in a treatment model. You're going to be treating things because you're not addressing the fundamentals, right? So you can do the next new thing out there as far as treatments, but if you don't know what type of plants you are, what type of sun you have, what type of soil you have, what type of water you have, the levels, then you have blind spots in your fundamentals. Okay. So whether you have symptoms or not, really functional testing is actually true healthcare. But if you do have symptoms and diagnoses and you're already on medications, you're already on hormone replacement therapy, you're using birth control pills, you're using anti-inflammatories all the time, you're on steroids, you're on antibiotics, you're on proton pump inhibitors, which are the acid blockers. I mean, the statins, which are cholesterol lowering medications. I mean, antidepressants, right? The serotonin reuptake inhibitors, like all of this stuff it's just a vicious cycle. And so in order to get your bearings and get to the root causes, you have to get functionally tested. So that's bottom line. All right. Okay. I've given you enough information today. Kind of summarize here again is that it's okay. We need a compartment. And what I mean by that is it's okay to understand that medicine is for one thing, and it's for a treatment and keeping us alive and keeping us safe in emergency situations. But that doesn't really have much to do with health restoration, right? And so there's a difference there. So we have to understand that difference. I've been giving you a lot of perspective, a lot of information. I mean, you could probably watch this video 10 times and still not get it all, I think. But you have to understand those differences. And that's what I call becoming your own doctor. Functional medicine testing is so awesome. Like in so many ways, I love it because it saved my wife's life, and I'm so passionate about it because it's so true. You just have to look at it from the right perspectives and understand that I'd say most doctors have good intentions. It's just what system are they working in, and we can't be confused about that because we have to become our own doctors is what I mean. Okay, so remember. I'm gonna, this is gonna be on my Instagram page. Okay, this live Q&A will be listed on my Instagram page. It's also gonna be on my Dr. Gunyon YouTube channel, so you can come back and reflect on those and watch them over again. You can share them with others easily that way as well. People that need to be hearing these things. From there too, just remember I'm doing my live Q&As every Wednesday morning. It's been at 8 a.m. Mountain Standard Time, and so it's been working out well there. So look for that. If you do have questions that you want to submit them to my info@drgunyon.com email. Okay, so that's info info@drgunyon.com. And you can submit those questions there, and then I can integrate that into my list of things to have Q&As about, right? Um, and so do that. Oh, also, like, usually every other week I'm doing my Road to Wellness, is what I call it, masterclass webinar. And so it's a live webinar where I'm going into understanding this even more, right? So what I talk about is how to become our own doctors, like how to understand the differences, and understand medicine versus, or crisis care versus healthcare, and understand what health really is and how to address it, and gain more and more wisdom and perspective. It's kind of, in a way, it's my training course for people to understand more and understand the direction that they need to go, because typically at the end of that, what we're shooting towards is that implementation for each individual, right? So it's like, hey, let's get you an appointment to meet with me, figure out what's going on, and get an idea, and then we can get to a point of what testing that you need in a functional medicine model to start to understand what's going on, and then what do we need to do as far as a process once those labs come back, right? So that's a big purpose of it too, not just for information, but for people to change their lives. Okay, so I am actually doing that tonight at 6 p.m. I have it scheduled for 6 p.m. tonight, Mountain Standard Time. You can, if you go to the link in my Instagram bio, you can click on that, and there's a link there that you can get signed up for it. Or you can also email us again and say, hey, send me the link for the Road to Wellness Masterclass tonight, and we'll do that. And you can send that again to the info@drgunyon.com. All right, guys. Well, it's been a great time here today. Hope you learned a lot. Let me know if you need anything, and I will look forward to seeing you next week on my next live. Have a great week, great day. We'll see you later.